My name is Martin Jimenez Mausbach. I'm the head of research at the Ostrom Institute. We are a grassroots, non-partisan think tank and policy advocacy organization based in Barcelona, and we serve as a bridge between the academic world, civil society, and public agents for uniting efforts and contributing to social progress. Today, we'll delve into the topic of talent attraction, research mobility, and immigration policy. Countries, cities, and universities are once again engaged in a war for talent over researchers, entrepreneurs, and students as the world emerges in fits and starts from a pandemic-induced summer migration. Labor market shortages in high-skilled sectors, demographic changes, and constant pressure to innovate have prompted governments across the globe to engage in global competition for talent. In this context, the regional factor has become increasingly important as governments seek to activate all policy instruments in the race for the best and brightest. A few months ago, Canada set out plans to hire around 1,000 new academics to reinforce, among other things, life sciences and biomedical research. A post-Brexit UK, keen to remain attractive, has just announced a global talent visa pledging to cut research red tape and open more career progression opportunities. In the US, meanwhile, worries about losing a global talent war have been rising over the years, leading to many think tanks exhorting the Biden administration for action and several legislative proposals. The European Union is steadily lagging in terms of its share of high-skilled immigrant workers in the total employed population, and to remedy this gap, it adopted the scientific visa and the blue card in 2005 and 2009, respectively. However, there are still considerable Europe's success in this competition for talent. Administrative and bureaucratic difficulties deter highly skilled migrants to see competitive attractive prospects. But what are the main obstacles to research mobility? Why should immigration and talent attraction be central to national strategies for retaining technological leadership? How is the geopolitical confrontation between the US and China, which sharpened during the pandemic, spurring this contest for STEM talent recruitment? Can we move towards a global talent visa? To shed light on some of these questions, today we are delighted to have with us Jeremy Newfield, Senior Immigration Fellow at the Institute for Progress. Hello, Jeremy. Thanks a lot for joining.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Claudia Finotelli, Associate Professor of Applied Sociology at the Universidad Complutense de Madrid. Hi, Claudia. Thanks a lot.
Hi to everyone.
Teseldie de Lange, Director of the Center for Migration Law at Radboud University.
Nice to see you all.
And Rana El-Bisri, Postdoctoral Research Marie Curie Fellow at the Beibite Biomedical Research Institute in Barcelona, IBI. Hi, Rana.
Hi, all.
So we will actually start with Rana. The video on your YouTube channel sharing the numerous barriers you have faced as a foreign researcher in Europe and the importance of international mobility for the scientific endeavor has had a great impact among the research community and has actually been one of the reasons to host this webinar and discuss potential policy solutions or implications. So could you briefly share your personal journey and explain what encouraged you to share it with a broader audience, and what were the main barriers you had to face, the consequences for your research work?
Thank you all. Thank you, Marty, and thanks for Institute Ostrom for their invitation today. So briefly, and as I said in my video, I'm a cancer researcher, mainly a Lebanese cancer researcher here at IDIBED, Barcelona. So I choose to be in the cancer field due to the fact that I'm really passionate about natural sciences and due to the personal inspiration that I actually got from my sister who faced cancer for a long term. And that's why I actually have to continue for that. And I have a promise to her to better transform lives of cancer patients, not only locally in Lebanon, but worldwide. And normally science is all over the world. So from this stage, I started my PhD in cancer research in Strasbourg. So I moved from my home country, Lebanon, to Strasbourg University, and I did my PhD in IGBNC, in one of the world-class institution in Europe, with Nobel Prize nominated, like Professor Pierre Chambaud and also Daniel Metzger. And afterwards, and unfortunately, after finishing my PhD, I had to choose between two postdoctoral positions. So it's fortunately for maybe European residents here, but it was unfortunately for me because it was in two places. One here in Barcelona where I am, and the second one in Strasbourg University, but in another institution. And sincerely, I joined initially Strasbourg offer, although it was not compatible to my scientific background and what I know about the cancer research. But sincerely, I joined that lab in order to accomplish my 5 years stay in France and be able to apply for the French nationality, as all I know from third world countries, actually. I have to say it openly. So, so for that, I skipped Barcelona and stayed in Strasbourg. But after like 3 months later, I was not feeling that I am doing my purpose and my promise toward also my sister for cancer. And I'm just filling bureaucratic paper, in other words, more free. And because actually the European passport, like French passport or any others, eases the mobility of cancer researchers or even researchers as cosmologists, political researchers, whatever, for like going quickly for international conferences, not doing a lot of visa, and for the short-term workshops, for actually also exchange knowledge internships, and because they don't really need a lot of bureaucratic papers for long stay worldwide. And so after being enrolled for 3 months in the postdoctoral position in Strasbourg, I cutted my my contract because I didn't feel that I am giving a good impact for the lab, and I'm honest with what I am doing. And I joined directly IDIBEL in Barcelona, and I am also thankful for my mentor here, because he waited for me like 6 months in order to come, and he always like insist and see that I am the best and for the Marie Curie Fellowship. And with my movement, I applied for the International and the Privileged Marie Curie, and I got it. And I am happy for that. With all of this, even with my movement, it even didn't let me feel free, even with the Marie Curie, even with plenty of prizes that I got. I was not free with my movement. I was sometimes feeling that I have to stay or regret to go, because I'm talking about this not only in the Corona time, because we could do online conferences, but now that we have conferences again, and just before the pandemic. And afterwards, I asked myself a question: why as a scientist I have to take irrational decisions, limit myself, limit my purpose, and limit my talent and my education, and don't give what I have, because what I have can make a difference. Just because the world put policies according to where you are from and your passport index initially, and not who you are and what you are giving and to humanity. And from that time, I also felt that it's not only related to me, it's a lot of testimonies, because a lot of my friends, they are also foreigners, non-European, they are also from China, from India. So also they are facing this struggle. And I said, okay, I want to talk about it. And I have here the good communication platform at UDBEL that adopt my idea. I suggest my idea to them. I don't have a scientific passport, like a diplomat passport, or like journalist identity card, international journalist identity card, that they really move very freely, and they need it. So as the scientist, because I couldn't take the Marie Curie if I didn't move, and I cannot exchange my knowledge if I cannot move. So as the diplomat need mobility, and journalists, we also need it, and we need this just like a passport or a visa that is our life. And for me, that's it. And I said,
Thanks a lot, Rana. I think it was a really inspiring story, and also I think it's the perfect testimony to actually set the scene and further discuss the policy implications of your idea, and in how to spur research mobility and make things easier for researchers like you. So thanks a lot for sharing your story. And now let's move to Claudia. So in recent years, there's been a move from what we would call a product-based to knowledge-based economy, and this fundamental business transformation has had also a powerful impact on the global competition for talent and on migration policy. So most European countries have been quite latecomers to this trend, and it was not until the late 1990s that they have changed their legislation to facilitate the recruitment of high-skilled immigrants. These countries have been paying attention to this talent pool, mainly due to an aging demographic, also labor market shortages in specific sectors such as healthcare or engineering. So based on your research on this topic, what are the main limitations and structural constraints of policy in talent attraction and research mobility? What are the different approaches of member states to highly skilled immigration, and do you believe that there are any international migration policies?
So thank you, Marti. Very, very pleased to be here in this floor. Well, I would say that the positive side of Rana's history is that she made it. Because certainly recruitment efficiency and the level of entry and residence bureaucracy are key elements to understand the race of talent. But I think that what evidence teaches us to the current state is that sometimes internal country barriers might be more important than the recruitment instruments per se. I will mention 4 elements, and I will not only address the attraction of researchers, because European countries need engineers, computer specialists, medical doctors. So the first for credential recognition. Recognition processes, especially for medical professions, are very cumbersome and time-consuming. They depend on licensing bodies, and this is why, for instance, in Canada, many medical doctors ended up as taxi drivers. Then you have the language issue, because English might be the working language in large firms, and also in renowned research institutions. But this might not apply to small and medium firms, which also need to attract global talent, not to speak of hospitals where it is crucial to attend patients in their own language. So I think that we all agree on the fact that it is not easy to learn a language like German or Dutch from the scratch. And bands of firms in certain fields that do not trust foreign degrees. This kind of academic nationalism has been observed in the case of Canada, for instance. And finally, I would mention a certain degree of academic endogamy in Mediterranean universities and research institutions, where to attract foreign talent, you need the nihil statements, which might not always agree with certain type of recruitments. Despite the relevance of these internal barriers, countries have in improving recruitment measures. This is true. So, for instance, Germany has focused on the development of a visa for job search. Canada has refined its point system by creating a pool of potential candidates who enter the pool on the basis of high qualification and who can more easily exit the pool if they have or they can prove the existence of labor contracts. Many countries have introduced residence visa for foreign graduates that graduated at their, you give them the time to search for a job on the territory without returning to the country of origin. The Directive for intra-corporate transfers in Europe has facilitated mobility with less bureaucracy. And I could mention more elements, of course, the existence of catalog of hard-to-find occupations or units that support large companies. But fact remains that we have still to face internal structural barriers which are difficult to overcome. Recognition procedures are still very time-consuming, and mentorship programs or bridge trainings have not contributed or contribute only partially to address this shortcoming. Language is still an issue. I'm not only talking about the situation of medical doctors, but also the fact that many universities in Europe don't have English-speaking administration staff and do not offer courses in English. Apart from the academic endogamy, of course, and on top of this, I think in certain countries, the level of bureaucracy requested to researchers, for instance, to manage their funding is absolutely unacceptable and makes countries less attractive to global talent. Salary is only a part of the story. A researcher wants to work with academic liberty and to have a certain work quality. So to cut the story short, I think that goodwill and smart policies are not enough in the way to attract global talent. What is needed is to complement them by smart and efficient administration, open and internationalized organizations, and a sustainable level of bureaucracy both with regard to the entry and residence, but also with regard to the same work quality of researchers in this case. So this is my point of view on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. I think you really touched a very key point, and I really like the overview on the internal constraints on academic mobility, research mobility, and talent attraction overall. I also like that you mentioned this problem that many administrations face when it comes to academic recognition of the professionals, also medical professionals, and this is something we actually covered in a policy report during the COVID pandemic, because of course there was a need to counter on many medical professionals, and in many countries, including Spain, there were many bureaucratic limitations on that regard. So thanks a lot for the very comprehensive summary.
Pleasure.
So now moving on to Sylvia. So statistics suggest that the European Union, as I was saying, lags behind when it comes to employing high-skilled migrants. And according to the OECD, foreign-born workers with university or equivalent qualifications make up just around 2% of the labor market, compared with 4.5% in the US, nearly 8% in Australia, and nearly 10% in Canada, which is an example that Claudia also mentioned. So initiatives like the Blue Card scheme, proposed in late 2007, or the Students and Researchers Directive, were intended to help to bridge this gap, but they seem to have failed in a sense. So most third country nationals are made to wait for at least 5 years, EU citizens, or to a far lesser extent, mobile long-term residents. So what has been accomplished in these last few years? What are the main challenges when it comes to it, also as Claudia was pointing to, in the European single market, and what is the potential role of trade agreements in facilitating research mobility?
Thank you, Marty, for these very relevant questions, and thank you, Rana, for your story, and already pointing out some very relevant points. What I want to bring forward is, like you asked, what has happened, and you already mentioned the Blue Card and the Student and Researchers Directive. Now, maybe it's good to just give a really brief update on these directives, because the issues that you note are also noted by the European Commission and brought forward several proposals to improve the European position in respect of attracting talent. So for one, if we talk about research mobility, we've seen the Students and Researchers Directive, a recast, which was agreed on in 2016. And this has extended to a certain level the intra-EU mobility, which is exactly what Rana also mentions, is that your stance in a way. While if I mean, I don't know how long you would still have to wait until you would have been able to apply for long-term residence, but the new directive would say that, okay, if somebody leaves for a year, at least the mobility is allowed. Yet what this directive does not do, and which is precisely something very interesting that's in the Blue Card, is allow you to add up your years in different EU member states. The Blue Card does offer this, so somebody who has that permit can work for 2 years in France, and then for a year in Spain, and then for another 2 years in Germany, and all that's 5 years. And just as long as it's a consecutive stay, it allows people to obtain long-term residence. And I think it's in the context of this webinar also interesting to reflect on the proposal that the European Commission brought forward earlier this year, which actually includes a recast proposal of the Long-Term Residence Directive. And if this is agreed by the European Parliament and the Council, it means that we will see that researchers, for instance, can also add up their stay in different member states towards long-term residence. And what I find important to stress as well is that the long-term residence directive proposal does not just focus on the highly skilled, because we can talk about the global war on talent, but I always say we're also in a struggle for skills. And I think that's also, Claudia, what you bring forward. It's not just academically trained people that we are missing out on it. And the good thing about this proposal is that also people who have a single permit, residence permit for other purposes, be it family, be it student migration, be it work-related migration, being protection, that eventually it all adds up to a long-term residence permit. Now, of course, that doesn't give what you say, Rana, a global visa travel. So that sort of has us look at international trade agreements and to what extent those, which are international law instruments and not just EU law instruments, to what extent trade agreements can offer a solution here. Now, they do offer temporary mobility, and I have to stress the word temporary, because it's only a 3-month usually, and sometimes there's a bit of an exception. In general, it's a 3-month mobility, and that might help for visiting the short-term visits that you mentioned, but it doesn't give the freedom that you describe as maybe diplomats have. And I really like the idea that you argue that academics should be eligible for this, although I did sort of have the idea that you put researcher, if you replace that by person, I think there's so many people with so many potential who are not academically trained across, would love to have what you are arguing for. Although I see that there are arguments to make why researchers might have it and others might not, I think we really need to be careful to make that distinction based on qualifications or skills or merit-based differentiations in the way that we treat people in the global mobility field. Maybe looking at my notes and looking at you, Marty, maybe I should leave it at this for a first round. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Iselda, for comment we have raised before. I think you touched upon very key discussion point around the potential of international trade agreement, the focus on skills rather than only academic research per se, and also the current challenges and barriers when it comes to intra-mobility in the EU as well. So thanks a lot for your presentation, and we'll cover some of these topics in the Q&A as well. So I will go now to Jeremy. So you have extensively written about the role of highly skilled talent for US competitiveness and also national security, advocating for STEM immigration reform in the US. So why does a thriving innovation ecosystem depend on its ability to attract global talent of our immigration systems, and the implications on growth and industrial policy, which is a relevant area we haven't covered yet today? And how is the geopolitical confrontation between the US and China, which of course sharpened during the pandemic, spurring this contest STEM talent recruitment?
Great questions, and thanks for the invite. I'm really pleased to be here. So I think the first thing I just want to underscore is the point that you made, that a thriving innovation ecosystem strongly depends on the ability of a country to draw on the world's talent. So we know that talent is distributed across the world evenly. No talent doesn't just come from one place, but opportunities aren't distributed evenly, and talent clusters aren't distributed evenly. And so we know that someone with the same person can be much more productive if they can move to a talent cluster. There's a great paper by Enrico Moretti about movement within the United States alone, and finds that moving from a median United States talent cluster to like 75th percentile can increase a productivity by 10%. And those numbers would be small compared to what could be reached in terms of moving around the world, moving where there's much larger disparities in the quality of talent clusters. And basically, this is people are more productive when their colleagues are also really productive, when there's a thriving network of engineers and supply chain managers who can work together, have spread ideas, and talent can make that even more effective by offering, if it's international, by offering a greater diversity of ideas that those clusters can be drawing on. And when countries like the United States realize that and to recruit and retain international talent, they tend to find that the international talent that they let move there has a disproportionate impact on their productivity. So in the US alone, which is what I most familiar with, foreign-born share of the population is only 14%. But if you look at inventors and patenting numbers, it's more than twice that, over 30%. If you look at US affiliated Nobel Prizes, it's also over 30%. If you look at large firms in the US, firms worth over $1 billion, over 44% of the founders are migrants. And so I think countries can recognize an opportunity here. And then, which brings me to one of your questions, which was how our immigration systems are failing to capture this. And I think to a large degree, the US has been complacent about it. For a very long time, the US was capturing a majority of the world's migrants, but that has changed, and the US has not changed its own system to accommodate that. And so while other countries are proposing global talent visas or merit-based systems, the US has relied on its decades-old system that it has not updated in over 30 years. And as a result, the US has seen a declining share of the world's migrants coming to the US. It's seen declining international student enrollment. It's seen and it's seen people, as wait times for immigrant visas have expanded, it's seen people just leaving if they're have to wait 10, 20, 30, even longer for a permanent visa and protections for their families and work authorization for their spouses. People don't want to put up with that, and they might say, even if I might make 5-10% less in Canada, it's better to move there. And so I think, yeah, the US has been complacent about it, and they've started to bear some of the costs in terms of the inability to recruit people. And then I think to your last question, how does the China affect all of this? I think the United States, as it is seeing China as more of a potential adversary, is at a juncture point. So on the one hand, there's calls for this to shut down and close off even more. There's people who say we need to, if foreign researchers might be stealing US IP or giving away trade secrets, we need to punish foreign countries by kicking out their international students. And that was one proposal that wasn't about China, but was related to geopolitics. There were some people who wanted to kick out Russian students from the United States in response to the invasion of Ukraine. But there's similar things about China. And so on the one hand, the US, I could imagine it could go down this path of shutting itself off even more, which I think would be a self-imposed disaster. But on the other hand, it could take this other path where it sees it sees a rising China as a reason to break out of its complacency, its decades-long complacency on immigration, and recognize that migration can be a powerful lever in its toolkit in supercharging economic growth, especially developments in critical emerging technologies that will be important for international competition, things like artificial intelligence and semiconductors and quantum computing, and making sure that researchers, cutting edge researchers who are at the top of their fields who want to work on those issues have access to the leading labs, the leading researchers, many of whom are in the United States. And so on the one hand, yeah, there's people calling for China to be caused for the US to close off. But on the other hand, there seems to be an increasing realization that this should be a wake-up call for the United States. And there's a few months ago, there was about 50 former US national security leaders who wrote a letter saying that recruiting STEM talent should be a central part of the US strategy to confront China. There was a report that came out that pointed to the fact that Chinese leaders themselves are saying that it would be that they were worried that the US would fix its high-skilled immigration system and prove to be more competitive. And so I think that US leaders are waking up to that. And there's a long tradition that they're learning more about of the US using international talent in geopolitical competition. They're looking at the way the US recruited German talent after World War II to confront the Soviet Union. And they're looking at, in the 90s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, how US science was given a boost by scooping up former Soviet researchers. And so all this is to say, yeah, the US is at a junction point. We'll see what decisions it makes. And I think there's some reasons for concern about it, but I think it could also be an opportunity.
Thanks, Jeremy. Great insight, and also thank you for introducing this dimension around migration policy also as another element in this toolbox when we talk about competitiveness, industrial policy, geopolitics, and yeah, I think these are really interesting points, and we can also further develop them in the Q&A and the wrap-up questions. So now I'd like, before we move on to the Q&A, and we have already a few very interesting points raised in the chat, in the Q&A chat. Let me ask you a common wrap-up question for the four of you. So a continuous global talent stream, as we've mentioned, will be key to ensure scientific excellence, innovation, competitiveness, and also even national security in Western economies. So how can we move the needle and ensure better mobility and talent attraction national programs? Can improvements in bringing in talent generate actually a virtuous circle by raising support for immigration overall? And what are your policy recommendations? Can we eventually move towards a global talent visa like Rana was pointing to? So just some of your key takeaways from this session, and also opportunity to add up on some of the comments that your colleagues have raised. Maybe we can start with Rana.
Thank you. Actually, I believe that we should make like reversible movement. So I think that if the Western countries always attract the talent toward their countries and leave the third world countries, and the talent will not go back, so you will have always this issue of not giving back education and talent to the third world country. And always like the Western countries will face problem, this problem, and the third world countries will face the problem. So the Western will face the immigration, and the third world country will face the lack. So we should, I think, and I believe that we should make something reversible and not only stick to apply for a nationality, because also some countries, they don't like nationality. Like, okay, in my case, I could have a dual nationality, but in other researchers, like in China or India, they can't. So they might go, for example, for USA or Canada, and then they got the Canadian or the USA nationalities, but then they cannot go back to region. And when they come back, they also will face bureaucratic thing, and their families are there. So this point, I didn't point it out in the, but I also think about it, and so
Yeah, very interesting point. And I
yeah.
actually think there's even a question on the Q&A that we can cover later on this concept of brain drain. Actually, maybe even challenging your assumption that it's always an asymmetry. But we'll touch upon that in a moment. But yeah, very interesting topic, and also this idea of scientific exchange. So not so reversible exchange between countries. So Claudia, maybe you can go next.
Thank you. I would say that we shouldn't think about a global a race for global talent as a kind of homogeneous field. Very much depends on the type of talent you want to attract, on how the country wants to attract is internally organized, and on the field in which actually the talent a country wants to attract should be included. So it makes a difference if we are talking about medium or large firms, about universities or research institutes. And I would be careful. I mean, it is a large long story, but the difficulties facing that, for instance, researchers face at the moment that they have to apply for a visa, to move to another country to attend a conference. This is not only a matter that concerns scientists. I mean, this is something, the gap between a visa policy and the implementation of visa policy on how, for instance, embassies or consulates work, is not only a matter regarding the scientists or global talent. It is something endemic, which relates or is well embedded in the functioning and the idiosyncrasies of our bureaucracies. So I would say extend the debate to how the visa system actually works. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Claudia. I definitely agree with this idea that there's endemic or embedded constraints within our bureaucracies and public administrations, but maybe the discussion around STEM talent and science, as Jeremy was pointing out, maybe it can be a lever sort of to change the more overall level policy when it comes to immigration and bureaucracy in a wider sense. But that's maybe a point for discussion, but very good point. Maybe Teseldia, you can go next.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have a straightforward solution or answer to your question. I was actually also inspired, Rana, by your call for the reciprocity, which is, I think, also indeed in the chat about the brain gain and brain drain, and usually now we speak of the triple win or brain circulation, which sounds very medical, but it's not. It just means that people with brains, and we all have brains, so it's people with talents at whatever level of the labor market move across borders, back and forth, to learn, to work together, and to bring their knowledge yet again to other places. And maybe I'm stepping ahead to just make a reference to the European policy in this respect. Over the past couple of years, there have been a couple of pilot projects on talent partnerships, which are projects in which EU member states who want to do this, I very clear that you cannot say that everybody has to sort of engage in this kind of activities. It has to fit the national labor market demands and workings. Yet these partnerships might have the potential to offer I sometimes call it a legal atmosphere which maybe you can also say it's within multinationals. Claudia mentioned multinational movement. You sort of move within the multinational, and that is facilitated. And you can imagine other zones within the economy. It can be in a scientific zone, or it can be a medical zone, or even technicians installing our solar panels, that we can exchange them, that they, need them. So you sort of creative about thinking how we can share the knowledge and the talent that's out there. So that could be, it has been, there's a lot of ideas out there. It's just often difficult to put them through the bureaucracies and the political debates to try for more circularity. And maybe if I may, just because I was really touched by the comment from Alex in the chat saying, well, the pandemic has actually offered so much chances for those who are not able to move. We finally do everything online. And I think, and I actually just canceled a conference next week because I cannot go there via land because the trains have just not gone back into operation. And I'm refusing to fly within Europe because I think one of the even bigger than mobility challenges that we have relates to the climate. And as academics, I think it's our first priority to think how we are going to contribute to that. And that might mean moving less. So I like, Alexa, your comment saying, well, for the climate and for the people who are excluded from mobility, doing kind of things remotely opens up immensely. So thanks for making that comment and reaching out and for joining from wherever you are. And I guess that is part of the new future that we are looking into, even without COVID. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Very interesting point on zones and innovative, flexible opportunities in the EU as well. And I also agree that this idea of virtual conferences and how that might have changed the paradigm when we think about mobility and research mobility is also very interesting. So maybe we can go to Jeremy now.
Thank you. This has been a great discussion. I guess one thing the one question I want to address that you bring was about the possibility of global talent potentially generating a virtuous cycle that could raise support for immigration. And I think that is one of its promises. The thing hanging over all discussions about immigration policy is, even if an immigration policy makes a lot of sense, that there's not really serious trade-offs from an economic perspective or social science, other social sciences, the political system can have strong skepticism about increasing immigration and making it easier for foreigners to enter a country. And I think it's really important to try to persuade people that skepticism is often unwarranted, that they're overlooking a lot of the benefits that people can bring. But at some level, the politics are just going to impose trade like them. And I think one of the promises about global talent and high skilled immigration is it seems to be the kind of thing that doesn't just generate direct benefits, but makes people more open to immigration generally. So there's some good research that looks at OECD countries and finds that the OECD countries that increase their high skilled immigration end up being more open to immigration in general and being more open to other forms of immigration. And so if we want to expand not just researchers and scientists, opportunities for them to move to countries, but technical professions and even other kinds of people as well, the kind of political system that's going to be open to that might be one that first has had skilled immigration first, to try to lay the political groundwork to show that the possible benefits from immigration, to show that it can help the receiving country in a way that people might not be persuaded of by academic arguments, even if we think those are true. And so, yeah, I think the idea of this political virtuous cycle is one of the best benefits from opening up avenues for global talent.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. I also agree with you on that point. I think around the discussion today, we've seen that immigration policy and this administrative constraints or bureaucratic constraints on one hand, and then research mobility and discussion around talent are intertwined. And maybe this idea of what we call in the think tank world of moving the Overton window, right? So that could be an option in the sense that people endorsing the idea that we do need to untap access to global talent could move a bit the general public's opinion when it comes to immigration overall. So thanks for raising this point. I think both Claudia and Teseldia, they both raised some of the questions that some of our attendees posted on the chat, but I don't think all of the members can actually see those questions. So I will read them for you, and then we can complement on some of and you can touch upon some of the points that we have discussed. So first one is from Albert. So I think we already covered a bit this point, but brain drain pessimists tend to recognize return immigration the only way through which source developing countries can re-up human. However, and this is something I believe Teseldia was mentioning, there is an increasing amount of the so-called beneficial brain drain literature. So this idea of talent exchange and talent circulation. So and those that higher prospective returns of human capital in a foreign country may induce workers to acquire more education and training. So maybe Jeremy, you can start on this one. What are the policy implications of this new research work?
Sure, but before I even say on the policy implications, I think some of this new research goes even further than that and shows, in addition to the potential long-term increase in human capital from a sending country, there's also technology transfer and increased potential increased investment, as well as people create business connections between countries that previously weren't as well integrated. And so, yeah, I think also one other thing that it focuses a lot on is remittance payments as well. And so I think there's the brain drain discussion, yeah, can dramatically oversimplify the way that emigration can work for a sending country. But I think it's complicated, and it depends a lot on the particular cases. There are some cases where it seems to be net beneficial for the sending country. The Indian IT industry has seen a massive boom from emigration. But on the other hand, there are cases where countries might be hurt. Ghana, their healthcare industry seems like it probably has suffered from the emigration of a lot of doctors. And so I think the policy implications will depend a lot on the individual circumstances for countries. And so I think one potential policy implication is what we were talking a bit about earlier, was partnerships between countries to met the relative or the relevant needs of the respective countries in question. So I think global skill partnerships would be an obvious policy that would be implied by this kind of research.
Thanks, Jeremy. Maybe Claudia, Rana, you want to touch upon this one as well? I think Teseldi already covered a bit, but Claudia, do you want to go next? Or
the brain drain and brain gain. I'm not very expert on this literature, but I think, the key is return. So, for instance, a lot of, Spain as an example of this. We are not talking about, of course, of a less developed country, but about a European country where a lot of researchers could return after years of staying abroad at research institutions abroad and be included into home country research institutes and universities, if the conditions, of course, apply. And I think this is an important point.
Insights on this one?
For me, for now, I am stick to stay in Europe or to go to USA or Canada because I can't go back to Lebanon because of the situation, and because as a researcher, research needs a lot of money, and if you have some economical crisis, so you can't work in research because you can't even work in medicine or anything. So for now, I want to continue here. So this is something personal, and it's a bit also struggle. Yeah.
So we hope the best of luck for
Yeah.
your research trajectory and personal.
Yes. I could make like a last message for me. Like I would continue my scientific career, will continue no matter what. I have already faced a lot of bureaucratic paper, a lot of things, and I was keen and I continue. And if I couldn't make it, I wouldn't be today with you here. Like I was not inspired to make this point out if I didn't pass through all of that. So all what I passed through make me give this feedback or make me give this idea in a positive way. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that was a very nice takeaway. We do have one last question. I think we have a couple minutes left, so we can cover that one, and then we can wrap up. So little attention is usually given to the wider family needs of mobile researchers. Maternity or paternity benefits have a major influence also in the attractiveness of foreign ideas or thoughts on this topic. Anyone wants to cover this one?
Yeah, I can make a brief comment. I think it's a very true statement. Again, not just for researchers, but I think for migrant workers across the board, it's relevant. And for instance, also for international students, and that was highly debated at the EU level, whether the students should have a right to family reunification. They don't, but researchers do. And once admitted, the family members have equal treatment with the nationals based on the EU at play. What I think is additionally important is the opportunities that a country offers to the spouse. So dual careers at academic institutions are definitely not mainstream across the board. And I think such dual career policies are essential to be attractive for international talent. If somebody has a partner who can't develop their own career, then there's very little chance of them wanting to move somewhere. So besides the rights and the rights as parents, I think such policies where companies or research institutions think along with somebody coming in for the opportunities of their partners is a very important policy aspect. Thank you.
Jeremy, do you have any remarks on this one?
I thought the previous answer was great. I think in the US case, I think one thing we've seen is that many visa categories that we use in the US to attract researchers don't offer the same rights to people's spouses. And so even maybe more so than maternity or parental benefits, is that we see people are coming to the US because their spouse might not have work authorization until they can get permanent residency. And so I think addressing that, one, would just directly give more freedom to the individuals who are being denied it, which is good on its own. And then two, bring their talents into the labor force. And then three, make it more attractive for those families to want to see the United States as an option. I know less about other countries' policies, but I would imagine that people, countries with similar policies might see similar deterrence effects.
Yeah, but I think we are running out of time. Thanks a lot to Celia, Claudia, Jeremy, and Rana. I think it was a very, very enlightening discussion with very complementary points and angles and with a very interdisciplinary perspective. So really appreciate your time and your collaboration on the webinar. Thanks for those attending online. We will also the video on our YouTube channel to support further discussions around talent, mobility, immigration, and potential reforms in the upcoming future. We've seen that Europe's position in the globalized economy means that in spite of problems we have identified here and today and the financial and economic challenges that we'll continue to face, it will remain an important destination for immigration and talent. However, if we are truly to succeed in the competition for talent, more collaborative and collective policies are necessary in order to streamline the process of immigration, of researchers, scientists, innovators, but also overall professionals as well. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Keep in touch and let's keep the discussion going. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.